Spanish vocabulary words for the clinic. We made it. And in a moment, we're going to go over some of the most common PT words that you are likely to use with your patients. But I want to give you a few techniques that I think can help you to improve your memory with these Spanish words. If your school experience was anything like mine, you were probably given a list of words that you needed to know for a test or a quiz, and not much else beyond that, other than a hearty good luck. And then you probably began memorizing those words using lists and note cards. And then you regurgitated them for the test, only for them to be forgotten by the time the next test came along. So when it comes to learning vocabulary, I prefer the teach you to fish rather than hand you one approach. Let me give you a few strategies that you can use to help yourself to better remember and apply new Spanish words. But of course, if you're not interested in that, then just skip ahead to this time and we can review the words there together. Let's briefly talk about meaningful learning as it relates to vocabulary. This is the idea of learning a word contextually so that you can relate it to other words or subjects. This allows you as the learner to relate foreign words to familiar concepts, words, phrases, and so on. You're taking an unfamiliar word and then connecting it to something that you are very familiar with. Let's use a quick example. Let's say you want to remember the word andador and its meaning walker. No, the other walker. There you go. Well, we could just try memorizing it like we did in school and create a vocabulary list and say it to ourselves 10 times in a row and then repeat that. Or let's try an example of meaningful learning and apply the word to a context that we can remember. So I picture a patient walking with a walker, and using a mixture of Spanish and English, I create the phrase, the patient walks with an andador. Now, I have a mental image of a patient walking with a walker, and I'm associating that image with the word andador. This is just one example, and this particular example may be more useful to me, but less so to you. But the nice thing about meaningful learning is that you have the ability to customize it to your specific learning style. But no matter what specific examples you use, the general principle of meaningful learning and using strategies like contextual learning or visual learning are ways that can make learning vocabulary easier and more meaningful. Another easy example of meaningful learning is the technique of grouping. This is where you choose words that all have a common theme and you group them together. So, for example, you might think of 5 assistive devices and you group those together. This makes it more likely that if you memorize even just some of those words, you'll associate the others with them and be more successful in recalling all of them. This is not to say that the more traditional learning methods are not valuable. They have their place as well. And I'm not saying don't memorize. Rather, use every tool you have to your disposal. Rote learning, the traditional way of repeated memorization, is an easy way to introduce yourself to a word. And using both flashcards and contextual sentences can strengthen your ability with vocabulary. All right, let's go over some common useful Spanish words that we can use in the clinic. Starting with our body, we have cabeza, cuello, hombros, brazo, codo, muñeca, y mano. Continuing down the body, we have pecho, abdomen, cadera, pierna, rodilla, tobillo, pie. While this is certainly not all-encompassing, I would argue these are the most common body parts we refer to within our practice. But am I missing any that you think should be added? Let's talk about durable medical equipment. You may have patients use bastón, muleta, andador, andador de ruedas, silla de ruedas, silla de ruedas eléctrica. With therapy, patients may often rely on family for assistance, so it's good to know some common names for family members. We have esposo, esposa, padre, madre, hermano, hermana, hijo, hija, amigo, amiga, vecino, vecina. And if you wanted to know if someone was a part of the family, you could ask if they were un miembro de la familia or una parte de la familia. So listen, of course this list is only an introductory list, but I believe these are the most common words within each of these categories, and they function as a good starting point. Of course, it's possible someone may refer to their second cousin, but more than likely you'll be hearing words like mother, father, son, and daughter much more frequently. But if you're interested in more expansive lists, please leave a comment below of what types of words you'd like me to go more in depth on, and I'll be happy to. So let's review. In this lesson, we talked first about how to be more successful in memorizing vocabulary. We spoke about meaningful learning and reviewed a few examples of this, such as contextual learning, visual learning, and grouping. We also spoke on traditional rote learning, the idea of repeatedly memorizing, like what we do when we use note cards. And while that shouldn't be used as your only learning tool, it does play a role, and it should be used in conjunction with other learning strategies. To add on to these ideas, I will also say that to increase your success with vocabulary learning, limit yourself to words that are most common in your work setting. So, for example, an inpatient therapist might need to know a lot more words related to a hospital room, like bed or chair. Whereas an outpatient neuro-PT may find him or herself using the DGI regularly, and they would want to know words related to that test. And finally, I introduced you to what I felt were some of the most common words you will use in your setting. Words related to the body, to durable medical equipment, and to family members. And while there are many words that may be useful to learn, this is just a starting point, an opportunity to start to set up your foundation in Spanish. And as you build off of your foundational vocabulary, you will then find yourself growing and expanding beyond just these words. But as a helpful reminder, here is a list of words that we learned and reviewed today. Now, while we've talked about some simple vocabulary related to people, to objects, and to parts of the body, what we really need to learn now are actions. In other words, verbs. And if you're feeling that that's intimidating to you, and you're remembering all of this memorization of verb tables from middle and high school, let me pull you away from that precipice now before it feels too intimidating. As with everything we've been reviewing so far, we're going to do this in a way that is approachable for a beginner. So hang around for that next lesson, where we use the fundamental elements to use to create our own original simple sentences in Spanish. See you there.